Thanks very much, Melissa. I would also like to start by acknowledging the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people of so-called Australia as the traditional custodians and first lawmakers of the various places that we're dialing in from today. I know we've got some people here from interstate, which is very exciting. I am on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, so I would like to pay my respects to their elders past and present, and in particular to Auntie Georgina for such a rich and wonderful welcome to country. Thank you so much. It's such a privilege to have your support for events like these. I would also like to pay my respects to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. And in order to properly acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded, I think it's important to acknowledge the traditional law of the country on which I am located and on which WEstjustice operates, which is Bunjil's law, the law of the people of the Kulin Nation. And my understanding of this law is that it states that those of us who walk on this country must care for country and the waterways, and must also care for the children and the young people who are on this country. And I think that this is a really important context in which to set the scene for this report, because we have a lot to learn from the people of the Kulin Nation who have long understood the importance of protecting the well-being of young people. On the other hand, what we found through this report and this project is that our Western colonial systems really aren't hitting the mark when it comes to protecting the well-being of young people, when it comes to all things employment. And to give you some background to this project, as Mel touched on, employment is one of the most important things for ensuring a young person's well-being in terms of their physical, mental, social and financial well-being. It's been shown to keep young people out of the criminal justice system, and it also has an effect on whether or not young people are employed or unemployed later on in life. However, what we know is that young people are being significantly undervalued as workers, despite the value that they do in fact bring to the workplace. Firstly, they're being locked out of employment, and this is more apparent than ever as a result of COVID. While all of us dialing in today have had the privilege of being able to work from home throughout the pandemic largely interrupted, young people are overrepresented in the industries that have been most affected by COVID and have struggled to find work with unemployment and underemployment rates at an all-time high. When they have been able to find jobs, we know that exploitation is common, and then young people tend to be some of the first people to lose work when things go wrong, when there's an economic downturn, things like that. And then this is particularly the case for young people in the western suburbs of Melbourne, many of whom experience greater levels of disengagement, greater disadvantage, and are generally more vulnerable to many of these issues. And these are the issues that we have sought to address through the Youth Employment Justice Project. This project came about, as Mel mentioned, after we identified through our employment and equality law program and our youth law programs that we had a pretty significant unmet need for legal services and education sessions. And through seed funding from Helen Macpherson Smith Trust, we were able to set up a standalone youth employment justice project, which we call the YEP because in the CL space, we love acronyms. And the Youth Employment Justice Project has run from July 2019 to May 2021, and it comprises three components. The first is targeted community legal education, which we call CLE, as a preventative and early intervention strategy to teach young people about their work rights and responsibilities. This is accompanied by embedded and integrated legal services where young people learn, study and access other non-legal support. So through our school lawyer program and through our youth law clinics, which when we weren't in COVID were located in the VisiCares Hub in Sunshine and the Youth Resource Centre in Hoppers Crossing. And then we have the advocacy and systemic impact piece, which we, by drawing on the data and trends collected through our education and legal services work, we advocate for systemic change. The main output has been this research report, which is run alongside the service delivery of the project. So we surveyed the participants of our legal service and our CLE participants, and we also conducted surveys and focus groups of other young people living in the western suburbs and the people who work with them. Before I present to you some of the key findings of this report, I'd like to first acknowledge and thank the people and organisations without whom this report and this project couldn't have happened. Unfortunately, if I named everyone personally, I'd probably take up the rest of this meeting time, but I would like to specifically acknowledge the Helen Macpherson Smith Trust for providing seed funding for this project, Melissa and the Youth Law team for creating the relationships without which this project wouldn't have been possible. I'd also like to thank my teammates from the Employment and Equality Law Program who were responsible for delivering this project, Tani Perkle, Kat Hemingway, Gabby Watson-Munro, but particularly Thea Debler-Diepold, who did the bulk of the on-the-ground work in helping our young clients and delivering CLE. I'd also like to thank all the members of the steering committee who guided this project and provided such valuable insights and advice all the way through. And in general, I just want to say a big thank you to all the young people and individuals and organisations who assisted with or participated in our research activities. We have learnt so much from you, and I am so sure that the people who read this report will too. So turning to the report itself and what our research found, through this report, we've documented the experiences of young workers at every stage of the life cycle of employment. So looking for work, at work, and losing work. And this includes the problems, current approaches, and gaps in services or laws, as well as the solutions and outcomes that the YEP was able to achieve. The name of our report really sums up many of the key findings of our research and the project. What we found was that really one of the most fundamental issues underlying the various problems that young people have at work, and which it really infects every part of the employment journey, is that in most cases, they're not aware of their rights and responsibilities at work, or where or how to seek appropriate support if something goes wrong. To start with, young people aren't being equipped with the right knowledge and tools at school to be ready for work, which creates barriers to entry into the workforce. For example, about 2/3 of our CLE participants were unemployed at the time that they attended a session. And as one of our research participants noted, you're not really taught the rights you have at work, you just have to learn by yourself, and you don't realise what rights you have in the workplace. What we heard is that young people don't really understand key workplace processes and responsibilities, or even necessarily understand what is expected of them in applying for jobs. And this is a particular issue for young people from CALD backgrounds who, as we heard, may not have had parents who worked to role model or give them advice about the norms and expectations of work. So simple things such as getting up early to be at work at 9, calling ahead sick, or even what is required in looking for or applying for a job. Once at work, not knowing about work rights tends to leave young people vulnerable to workplace exploitation. For example, 2/3 of the clients who attended the YEP legal service were victims of some form of wage theft and were collectively owed in excess of $230,000. A little more than 1 in 10 of both our clients and the young people that we surveyed were victims of some form of discrimination in the workplace. And then if we look at the intersectional overlay, young workers from culturally and linguistically diverse backgrounds, so CALD backgrounds, were disproportionately affected by these issues. For example, of all the young people that we surveyed, 85% of those who were paid below minimum wage were from CALD backgrounds, and 93% of those who reported undertaking unpaid work or some form of unpaid training were also CALD youth. And then finally, young people's avenues to recover their entitlements or improve their working conditions if something does go wrong is often limited by their lack of awareness of where to go for help. The other major problem that also seems to infect every life stage of the employment journey is the precariousness of work that young people often find themselves in. More than 2/3 of our clients were engaged in some form of precarious work, and this includes casual employment, contracting arrangements, fixed-term employment, and labour hire arrangements. Precarious work tends to mean fewer rights and protections in the workplace, which again leaves young people vulnerable to exploitation. It often means that they are unwilling to complain about their entitlements or poor working conditions for fear of being fired. And this also has a really detrimental impact on young people's well-being. We heard that precarious work was affecting young people's attendance at school, which Mel mentioned, with some young people being asked to work shifts really close to the end of school or late at night. And also it has a really negative impact on young people's mental health. And this is summed up well by what one participant told us, which is, my friends who currently have a job hate it because they're labelled as casual workers, so could get a call at any time, and they have to go into work because otherwise they could lose their job, and it takes a toll on their mental health. We were able to offer solutions to some of these problems through the WEstjustice legal and education programs. In total, we provided 37 education sessions to approximately 1,800 young people and free legal advice or assistance to 106 clients. What our findings showed is if you can intervene early with targeted CLE and or legal assistance, this can really change the trajectory for young people. Through our CLE, we not only helped to build young people's understanding of their work rights and responsibilities, with 98% of our participants reporting that they felt confident they understood their work rights and responsibilities. We also helped to build their confidence to ask for their legal entitlements and stand up for themselves. So 93% of our participants said that they would be likely to stand up for their rights and take action if something went wrong. What was surprising to us, though, was that when we asked people how they would use the information that we taught them, more than a third of young people wrote pretty much the same answer, which was to tell us that they would use the information from our CLEs to be job ready. We also found that our CLE presentations helped to improve access to our legal services. What our research told us was that young people tend to have an inherent mistrust of lawyers, particularly due to the sorts of stereotypes that are perpetuated by TV. They also told us that they don't necessarily know that there are free legal services available. And they also told us that they generally didn't think that lawyers were for young people. They told us that they thought that this was more of an adult thing. But what they did tell us was that face-to-face engagement, so meeting a lawyer in person, helped them to overcome that mistrust and some of those misconceptions. And in fact, the overwhelming majority of our CLE participants said that they would contact WEstjustice if they had a problem and would recommend WEstjustice to their friends. In addition, through our integrated legal services, we also help to overcome some of the barriers that young people face in accessing legal services, specifically to exercise their employment rights. Historically, through our youth law programs, we found that young people are generally less likely to self-refer for assistance unless they're dragged into the legal system, such as through criminal charges or debts or fines. And employment law in particular is quite tricky because it requires people to proactively exercise their rights, and it's generally quite complex. However, through the strong referral pathways that we built with schools and youth hubs and other services, we actually had about a third of our clients who came to see us seeking just general advice about their rights proactively rather than in relation to a specific problem. And in total, we helped young people to recover $156,000 in employment entitlements and compensation. But one of the most significant things that we found was that our legal assistance actually helps to improve young people's employment outcomes in the longer term. So 93% of the clients that we surveyed 6 to 12 months after receiving our assistance were in jobs, and this was during COVID when jobs were scarce. And then of those who had found new jobs since coming to see us, 100% of them reported an improvement in their working conditions. And the majority of these participants attributed all of this to our legal assistance and what they had learned about their work rights and responsibilities. So where to from here? We made a total of 22 recommendations for reform in our report, so I won't take you through all of them today. In particular, we've made quite a lot of technical recommendations for legislative reform, which I'll leave you to read in the report. But to summarise our recommendations in terms of broad themes, firstly, we recommend that we must be teaching young people about their work rights and responsibilities at the earliest available opportunity. At a minimum, we recommend that a work rights and responsibilities training module is embedded into the school curriculum, but we also recommend that this be built into tertiary education courses and transition to work programs as well. Secondly, community legal centres must be funded to provide free legal assistance to young people with their work rights issues. Thirdly, government must create more pathways into secure and stable employment for young people. And fourthly, we think legislative reform is needed to strengthen the legal protections relating to young people's work rights. In terms of making these recommendations a reality, we're currently exploring opportunities for funding for phase 2 of the YEP to continue to be able to provide our legal services and education workshops to young people on an ongoing basis. In addition to these two activities, phase 2 would also involve more research, hopefully to investigate in-person service delivery compared to virtual service delivery, which is sort of what we had to resort to as a result of COVID. And we're also planning to investigate the impact of CLE on long-term employment outcomes. Our ultimate goal, in the event that we can secure funding, is to look to a statewide expansion of the YEP program and model of service delivery, so that all young people in Victoria have access to this sort of education and legal assistance. But in good news, we are excited to say that we're already on track to implementing some of these other recommendations. We've received some funding from the Department of Families, Fairness and Housing to run a Train the Trainer program with community employment connectors and Victorian African Community Action Plan employment brokers, who will work with young job seekers from called backgrounds, as well as other older job seekers from called backgrounds. And this program will ensure that these community employment connectors and employment brokers understand relevant employment laws and processes and can refer young job seekers to us for advice and support when needed. We're also working with Melbourne University to develop and pilot a work rights and responsibilities training module for the VCAL curriculum, which we hope to be able to scale for the entire Victorian school curriculum one day, particularly once the VCAL training program transitions to the Foundations Pathway Certificate. That concludes the presentation of the findings of this report. You're welcome to read the full report, which is now on our website. Thank you all so much for coming along today, and please feel free to reach out to me with any questions. I've put up my email and contact details on the slide for you. To leave you with a parting message thinking about this report and everything that I've just touched on, ignorance is not bliss, but there are really tangible ways in which we can equip young people with the tools to step out of the dark and into positive employment experiences.